Hello, everybody. It is 9 o'clock, and I have the honor and the pleasure to open the second day of our conference. And I am very happy to also introduce the first chair of today, Dr. Alicia Wise, and the session 3 is on transformative journals. Alicia Wise is a game changer in many ways, working at the intersection of copyright, digital technologies, and policy. She has more than 30 years of experience in the academic information space, including roles associated with libraries, publishers, and researchers. Most recently, she was with Elsevier, where she led open access and global strategic relations. She has served on the boards of Access to Research, Accessible Books Consortium, Chorus, CLOCS, the Digital Preservation Coalition, as well as Research for Life. So without much further ado, it is wonderful, Alicia, for you to chair this following session, and I'm very much looking forward to this session on to the second day.
Thank you so much, Max, and good morning, everybody. Welcome to the section on transformative journals. A couple of important things. We want to make this as interactive with you as we possibly can. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll see both a Q&A section and a chat section. You can use either of those. Please feel free to put questions or comments for any of the speakers. Also, if you would like to speak and ask your question out loud in person, you can do that, but we'll need to unmute you. So just leave us a text in one of those places, the Q&A or the chat, to let us know that you'd like to speak, and we'll arrange that. Right, without further ado, transformative journals are the newest and a very exciting pathway to compliance with Plan S. And we're really lucky today to have its architects and earliest adopters with us. We have a really star-studded panel. We have first up Robert Kiley, who's the head of open research at Wellcome Trust. And he's a bit of a publisher on the side too, as he's responsible for many of the services like the Wellcome Open Research Platform. He's also very engaged with eLife. Then we have Stephen Inchcombe, the Chief Publishing Officer from Springer Nature. Fascinating biography. I would encourage you to read this fully, but formerly a fully chartered accountant. I love learning this. And then we have Claire Moulton, the publisher from Company of Biologists, who is she's just brilliant. She's a ray of light, a sparkling presence. So we have a delightful panel for you today. And without further ado, let me hand over to Robert Kiley.
Good morning, Alicia. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. I'm going to just share my screen. So I'm very conscious that we really want to spend as much time as we can on hearing from you and discussing this matter. So I'm going to whiz through my presentation in about sort of 10 minutes. I'm going to just try and set the scene as to the rationale why Coalition S developed transformative journals, the rules of engagement, if you like, and how publishers have reacted. So it's really this is very much sort of scene setting. So just by starting off though, just to put this into context, Plan S, as everyone is aware, supports a number of routes to open access. We obviously support fully open access journals. We support what we call the green route, the rights retention strategy, and we also support the transformative route. And the transformative arrangements in our nomenclature include a variety of models, including things like support for read and publish deals. We see those being very effective for encouraging a wide-scale transition. But we also develop transformative journals, and that's what I want to spend the next sort of 5 minutes or so talking about. So transformative journals, a lot of text on this slide, apologies for that, but these are like the rules of the game. So it's a subscription journal, or what some publishers refer to as a mixed model journal. but one which is committed to transitioning to fully open access journals. So they are, in the view of Plan S and the view of Coalition S, they are fundamentally different from a traditional hybrid journal, which doesn't have that explicit commitment to transition. So there's a commitment to transition, and then there are a number of sort of KPIs which we require a journal which wants to go down this route to adhere to. So one of it is around an annual increase in proportion of content which is made open access, and we set that a target of content at least 5% in absolute terms year on year and 15% in relative. There's a commitment that the journal will transition to open access, to fully open access as soon as possible, and in any event when 75% of the research content is open access. One of the issues, which I'm sure we're very familiar with the what I call the traditional hybrid model, was a sense that there were double payments. And no, that's refuted, but that perception is still there. So what we require with Transformative Journal is a very transparent way to demonstrate that the publisher is offsetting subscription income from payments it receives through the Transformative Journal model. We expect publishers to update authors on its usage. We want to encourage this model, and one of the ways we believe we can do that is by demonstrating to the researchers themselves the real benefits of publishing open access. So we want publishers to show the usage of their content, the citations they've enjoyed, and the online attention that they get. And to make this all open and transparent, we require publishers, the publishers of Transformative Journal, to publish this data annually. So that's like the rules of the game. I mentioned about the offset in subscription income. There's no set way in which publishers need to demonstrate that, but we cite this example frequently. This is the Royal Society, which is not a transformative journal, but it does have a very transparent way at how it offsets. So if you look at this, for example, if you look at the philosophical transactions, you will notice, and if you look to the right, the two columns, you can see that the subscription content fell by 2% in the two rolling years they looked at, and because of that, the subscription price fell by 2% in relative terms. So that's what we mean by offsetting, being transparent about how prices are offset. We are keen to ensure that transformative journals, like all the other, as with the other transformative agreements, that they are transitional. So support for transformative journal will end at the end of 2024, and after that, the ambition is that Coalition S will only support pure publishing arrangements. So we won't be paying for this for this model thereafter. The rationale. Why do we do this? Well, I think there's a number of reasons why we developed this model. One, we wanted to continue to provide a means by which our funded researchers could continue to publish in a wide variety of journals and ensure that the final published version, the version of record, is made open access. And we wanted that to be in journals which are committed to move to a fully open access model. So it was really about making sure there was an option whereby our researchers could publish and the version of record be made open access. We recognize particularly, because I do think that the read and publish, the big sort of transformative agreements we're seeing, are where the scale of transformation is going to happen. But we recognize that that model may not always be appropriate if you're in a country which doesn't have a sort of a tradition of doing big library consortia, but you want to ensure researchers in that country can access an open access version of record model. So I think the transformative journal will work particularly well in those countries where they don't have that tradition. And it may potentially be useful for smaller societies. Alicia last year, in partnership with Welcome UKRI, did a lot of work to help smaller learning societies develop transformative agreements, but they're still requires a bit of heavy lifting with that work. And I see the Transformative Journal as an alternative or complementary approach to use in partnership with a transformative, transformative agreement model. So that's really the rationale for that. The response so far has been largely positive. I'm delighted that we've got Stephen from Springer Nature and Claire from Company Biologists, both of which are publicly committed company biologists have already made their public commitment and have got transformative journal status. We saw last week the CUP announced their intention to move all their journals to a transformative journal model. An example of a relatively small, I believe, small society publisher is American Journal of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene, and they have decided that they also want to go down the transformative journal. So it is a model which is gaining some traction. It's not massively widespread at the moment, but I suspect as Plan S, as we get nearer January 1st, 2021, I anticipate other publishers applying for transformative journal status. Question we get asked a lot, well, are funders actually going to support it? And here's where we can explicitly say the majority in funders in Coalition S have explicitly stated they will support transformative journal. That includes Wellcome Gates, Research Council of Norway, and many others. But I just want to make it clear that that does not, of course, give publishers a blank check. All funders reserve the right to decide if a transformative journal fee is, in our language, fair and reasonable. And that's quite difficult to do at the moment. We know the price. We don't necessarily know how that price has been arrived at. And another piece of work which I'm delighted Information Power and Alicia helped us with last year was the Price and Service Transparency Framework. This will come into effect in the middle of 2022. And through this, we believe that there will be a much clearer way in which researchers, libraries, funders can start to understand whether the price they're being charged for the service is fair and reasonable. And there is a final concern we hear that by some publishers that funders will use the rights retention strategy rather than pay for a transformative journal APC. So in the rights retention strategy, we make it clear that our authors, by dint of their grant agreements and by dint of informing the publisher of a prior license, there is a concern from some publishers that funders will simply make use of the author-accepted manuscript. Why would we pay many $1,000s perhaps when we could have it for free with an author-accepted manuscript? I would stress, and I will continue to make this point, that we as funders, we prefer the version of record. We prefer the version of record because it is the version of record. On a practical basis, we know that authors are not particularly good at self-archiving manuscripts. And I know that if I ask a publisher to do it through some sort of contractual arrangement via an APC model, the publisher will do that, the author's not so good on that. So we continue to point out that we prefer the version of record. And I would encourage publishers to judge us by our actions rather than your concerns. And what happens at the end of each year, just in terms of monitoring, this is my final slide. So as I made clear at the start, journals which have been granted this TJ status have to publish data at the end of the year to show how they've met the KPIs or not. And obviously, if there's clear evidence that a journal has not met their KPIs, then we reserve the right to remove that journal from our approved transformative journal list, and then that journal will not be eligible to receive funding in forms of APC payments. I'm going to stress again, though, that we are not setting this up with the intent that we're setting this up to fail. We want journals to adopt this model and to experiment with it and to make it a success. And I'm not going to start saying here that we're going to start changing these KPIs, because we're not. What I will say is that we'll adapt a pragmatic approach. And if there are particular publishers which don't quite hit the targets in some journals, but perhaps in others, we will take a very pragmatic approach to that. So we want this to be a success. We want to work with the publishing community to support this model, and we hope others will take it up. And at that, my conclusion really is, I say, this is a new model which offers subscription mixed model publishers a way in which you can publish Coalition S funded research, which is aligned with Plan S, and it provides an opportunity for these publishers to demonstrate their commitment to open access. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to hand over to one such publisher, Stephen Inchcombe for Springer Nature, who's going to tell us about what Springer Nature are doing in this space.
Good morning, everybody. Robert, thank you very much for that clear overview overview of the of transformative journals. Sorry, I'm struggling this morning to get my screen to behave. Hopefully now you can see my slides. What I'd like to do is to complement what Robert was talking about with transformative journals and explain our perspective as a large publisher with a lot of experience in open access and how we see transformative journals fitting in, what we see their great advantages being, and what challenges will remain even with transformative journals as part of our toolkit, if you like, going forward. First thing to say is that our mission is what drives everything we do, and making the knowledge that we publish as accessible, understandable, discoverable, usable, reusable and shareable as possible is the driving theme, and that obviously applies very much to open access. It goes beyond that though with open access. Accessibility is what everybody always focuses on, but clearly we see greater transparency, more openness in the research community as aiding reproducibility as well. There's citation and use advantages. It helps with collaboration, especially between disciplines, especially cross-border. So there's a whole variety of ways in which open access helps the wider research enterprise. Beyond that, though, open access is the pathway to open science, and we see that as even more important in many ways than open access in and of itself. Open science opens the doorway to open data and the fair data standards, to open software code, to open protocols and so on. It enables open metrics to be created. It improves the ability to evaluate impact of science and researchers themselves, and it allows people to gain greater credit for all their achievements. And I think if you look at the measures, there's quite a famous one on open data done by PwC for the European Commission as one example. The benefits of open science to the wider research enterprise dwarf the costs of research publishing. So this is the great prize, and this is what should guide, in our view, everything we do about open access to make sure that we capture this prize on behalf of the whole research community, not just research publishing. And we see really quite a long and extended path to have to navigate our way through. And let's face it, we've been on this path for 20 years and we're still nothing like as advanced as we all want to be. So let's just recap where we are, how we got to where we are, and what still needs to be done with transformative journals, if you like, as the pivotal point in the centre, since that's the focus of today. As a publisher, the first thing you have to do is to commit to open. And that means accepting that there are costs and risks and time taken, but there are also going to be opportunities as a result. The next thing you have to do is to reevaluate your policies, your processes, your systems, business models and relationships, and also the mindset of your people about what's the role of a publisher and how to succeed in meeting the needs of researchers. The easiest thing to do is to launch new open access journals. They can be therefore additional to rather than a substitute to what you're already doing. That can get you going. But by itself, open access journals are never going to be able to replace the hundreds of years of journal history, of relationships, of trust and reputation that already exists with the journals that we're all been running for many years. Transformative agreements, in our view, are the most important mechanism for transitioning existing subscription and mixed model journals into open access. one of the challenges of open access with all the individual payments is there's a huge amount of additional work and as a result cost, and that's quite complicated for institutions as well as publishers to manage. Transformative agreements can replace an annual subscription arrangement with an annual agreement that covers both access to remaining subscription content, but also payments on behalf of individual articles published out of that organisation. And in the main, they're tending to be done at the minute at country level consortia, which means that hundreds of relationships can be replaced with a single one. That said, there is a great challenge in that, in our experience, having done more at Springer Nature than anywhere else, everybody has a different starting position. Everybody has some specific different issues to deal with. And so we've done 12 of those now at country level, and all 12 are a little bit different. So you've got to be able to accommodate those differences in your contracts. But even more important, you've got to be able to accommodate them in your systems, because the institutions want us as publishers to take on the responsibility for measuring, managing and ensuring compliance and reporting against the outcome. Transformative journals are absolutely critical because many places, as Robert talked about, are not yet set up to be able to do transformative agreements. There's quite a lot of pooling of money that's necessary across organisations, sometimes across funding agencies as well as institutions. And that's tough to pull off for our customers. So transformative journals are the route by which individual authors, researchers can transition and use open access, genuine open access, gold open access on an article by article basis, rather than having to wait for a transformative agreement to be in place. I'm going to come back and spend a couple of minutes on transformative journals in a moment. Even so, challenges remain. Green open access, Robert referred to green open access as it extends. The differences between green and gold at surface level appear to reduce. In reality, it is not the version of record, it is not the path to open science, and therefore we see this as a risk to genuine complete transition to open access and ultimately open science. And we have to make sure that we find solutions or we set it aside and genuinely commit to the gold route because it's the only one that we can see that will take us to open science. Challenges also exist in regional variations and the complexity of funding systems at the moment, and I'll come back to these challenges also at the end, and the discipline variation and different formats, by which I mean what might be right for articles isn't necessarily right for academic books, and so which for many of us are a very important part of our publishing breadth, and also some things that can benefit, especially in the monographs area where overviews of research are provided, and where greater role in the humanities and social sciences exist, where those things also need to be confronted. But ultimately, we see an attractive future beyond open access in supporting open science. And that's really where I think the prize of open access is the greatest. As Robert said, transformative journals are a way of transitioning subscription and hybrid journals, if you like, mixed journals, that the critical thing is that you commit to becoming in time a fully open access journal. That time is as fast as publishers we can make it, but it also requires the demand side, the authors, researchers, institutions and research funding bodies to be able to meet that goal. And that Robert and his colleagues at Coalition S are enabling primarily at the minute within Europe, but also with some participants from North America like Howard Hughes and Gates Foundation, but this hopefully will expand and become more global. But at the moment, there are challenges in other regions as to how to get others to embrace the same approach. As publishers, our commitment in embracing transformative journals is that commitment to annual open access growth, 5% absolute, 15% relative, as Robert said. When we get to a threshold of 75%, then we do need to flip. You know, you can't keep saying at some point that the journal is mixed. At some point, you've got to embrace open access. Our modelling says that at 75%, we'll be able to cope. We'll sort of have a bit of a dip, but we think it will recover, providing the demand side exists sufficiently. There needs to be full and enthusiastic promotion for the benefits of open access, and as publishers we have a responsibility to do that, as well as the other stakeholders, demonstrating that to gain confidence for authors to take advantage of it. The open metrics and reporting side is an opportunity for us all to develop in order to be able to provide the transparency, yes, about pricing, but also about the other benefits of open access for researchers, so that they're motivated to be able to do that, and for the whole community to have the confidence that they know what they're getting for their money. As much as I hope you could understand how enthusiastic I am about transformative journals, in fact, back in April when Robert and his colleagues at Coalition S announced it, we very quickly announced then that our intention is to transition all 2,300 of our mixed journals, including all of the nature journals, to become transformative journals as soon as we possibly can. We're preparing ready to make that announcement before the end of the year, lock that down. There's a few things still to sort out on the nature journals, but that's very advanced now, and we aim to clarify that well before the end of the year. But just lastly, there are these challenges that will remain, and we have to, as publishers, I think, work with the other stakeholders on the demand side in particular to be able to address them. Our database shows that there's 701 today and counting open access mandates and rules that exist across publishers, the vast majority of them, 2/3 of them in Europe. The fact that the rest of the world is so much less, and the fact that there are so many, and therefore there is great diversity in those mandates and the specific individual rules, we not only need to expand the number so the whole world is covered, we also need to help standardize with funding agencies, with institutions, so that we don't have so much variety, because as publishers we have to comply with all these as global organizations, and it is incredibly demanding to meet all these different requirements simultaneously. We also need to help standardize and streamline the process for applying funding. 75% of Springer Nature's authors of open access articles last year took funding from more than one source, and either they have to deal with that complexity, or their institution does, or we do as publishers, and we have to be able to make life simpler, not keep adding complexity to everybody, because it's creating friction and it's slowing up the process. The green open access side, I've already mentioned, we see it as a risk of undermining the transition to open science, and we have to find solutions, not just complain about the problem. And lastly, and I would just finish with this, as publishers, it really is beholden on us to try and listen and understand what the concerns are and find solutions. As a publisher in open access, you are ultimately a service provider, and we therefore have to understand our customers' needs and design and deliver services to solve them. And with our other stakeholders, the researchers, the institutions, and the funding agencies, we have to listen, we have to understand, and like the complexity, for example, on funding or the regional variations, we have to help solve these problems rather than just complain about them. I hope you can see that I'm enthusiastic, and I see a great role for publishers in being able to help with all of this, and an outcome that can be more successful and better for everybody. That's my perspective. I'm going to now hand over to Claire Moulton from the Company of Biologists, as Alicia introduced earlier, and I hope that you'll enable her to be able to give you her perspective on how these things can work for a publisher like the Company of Biologists. Thank you very much.
So Stephen has given a great introduction to the strategic thinking behind these transformative journals. So I'm going to now talk about the experience of the Company of Biologists. And as mentioned, we have already been afforded transformative journal status. So my presentation will be perhaps a little bit of a how-to guide as well. So this is an introduction to a much smaller portfolio. We have 3 well-established hybrid journals, which are now transformative journals. And we have 2 newer fully gold open access journals. So I'm going to focus on our thinking at the beginning of the year, having been through some of the strategic thinking that Stephen's already presented. We've been offering open access options since 2004, but our 3 hybrid journals had plateaued in their level of open access. And I'm going to show you a little bit of what that looks like. So if you look at the first 2 journals in the greens, you can see that we had quite an increase in open access up until 2014, after which the level of open access has plateaued. I'm going to say it's around 20%. That's largely to do with funder mandates. And then if you look at the 3rd journal shown in orange, a very different pattern. So this journal has the same APCs, the same open access policies and promotions to authors, but this community has just not taken up the open access in the same way. Their funders haven't mandated open access, and they've shown much less interest in open access issues when we've talked to them. So the other thing that we did this year was we introduced read and publish agreements, which in Coalition S are also referred to as transformative agreements. We introduced them quite late in our renewal cycle, so we were delighted that 3 consortia immediately took them up for the UK, Ireland and Israel, the UK being one of our key author bases. And we are focusing on more arrangements for read and publish for 2021. That's one of our big focuses this year. But as Stephen mentioned, it's actually a lot of work, and for a smaller publisher, it's quite difficult to find the reach to speak to all of those consortia, to do the negotiations, everyone wanting a slightly different contract. So that is a big focus for us for this year as well. We also had an eye on a deadline. So Plan S implementation is scheduled for the 1st of January 2021 for some of the funders. And so we were very keen to progress our compliant hybrid options. As I've mentioned, Coalition S, including the UK, but many other of the funders, include a really core group for our author base. So show here a table, it's a snapshot from 2018, in fact, showing the percentage of open access research articles on each of the 3 journals, then the percentage of research articles funded by Coalition S funders, and then if you combine them, obviously there's overlap between those 2 groups, we can estimate that if all of the existing open access authors and all of the Coalition S authors picked open access, on the first 2 journals, we'd have roughly 37% open access. And on the 3rd one, we'd have roughly 11% open access. And I will come back to those numbers in a moment. So it was decision time. Clearly, we couldn't do nothing because such a big chunk of our authors are wanting to publish open access. But at the same time, we were very far from being able to flip to open access when the majority of our authors are not publishing open access. As Stephen said, it's important to consider that free author accepted manuscript deposition, the green route, and we also rejected that for similar reasons. And so our thinking had been moving towards transformative journals for some time, and we made that decision firmly this year. So the focus is on being a compliant hybrid for the transition period from 2021 to 2024, using that 2-pronged approach: transformative agreements, the read and publish deals, plus transformative journals. Robert outlined some of the commitments that a transformative journal makes, and I'm really going to focus on the commitment to increase the open access articles by 5% each year, though there is also some flexibility to allow a 15% increase over a rolling 3 years. So having made the decision that we were definitely going to go for transformative journal status, we started to liaise with Plan S, and they wanted to take a look at our press releases and announcements to make sure that we were committing to the requirements for a transformative journal. They were pleased to see that we've had in place for a number of years a mechanism to avoid double dipping, double payments. And we also had our transparent metrics ready. I'm going to talk about that again in the next session, but because we've been part of one of the transparency pilots, we already had that information available as part of the transformative journal commitment. So on the Coalition S pages, there is a page about transformative journals, including this box, which has the apply here for transformative journal status. So this is the route you take. And this is what the some of the information that that form asks for from the publisher. I'm going to highlight the sort of the metrics part, which is you need to enter your preferred start date for offering transformative journal services to researchers, and I'm sure that many of us will put the 1st of January 2021. You then highlight the number of articles published in the previous calendar year and the number of those which were made open access at the time of publication CC BY. And that is so that they can monitor from year to year how you're growing your open access percentage. So in terms of communication, a transformative journal doesn't just do the various requirements, it also needs to be very public about announcing them and explaining that its commitments. So one of the things that we did was we quickly started producing information about our transformative journal status on our websites, along with FAQs for authors especially, but also for funders and librarians. We published editorials about open access and transparency, including promoting our transparent metrics. And we were delighted that Robert gave us a great quote for our press release, highlighting the fact that we had already developed read and publish arrangements. Now we're becoming transformative journals and hoping that other journals would follow the lead set by the Company of Biologists. So it was really good to be the very first journals to be afforded transformative journal status and to appear on the website. As Robert said, the American Journal of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene recently joined us on that list. And going on announcements recently, we hope that CUP and BMJ journals will appear there soon as well. So I'm now going to look at the numbers in a bit more detail, and I'm going to ask you to allow a large pinch of salt because each time I look at the numbers, they are slightly different. For example, the big announcement that HHMI joined Coalition S recently changes the number of authors affected by these mandates. But let's take a look at one of the journals. So this is one of the journals that has currently plateaued around the 20% open access mark. And this shows a completely hypothetical situation where we get exactly 5% open access growth each year, just to show what that looks like. And I'm going to bring you back to that number that if all of the current open access authors plus all of the Plan S authors selected open access publishing, this journal could reach 37% open access with no other changes. And you can see that that would take us to the end of 2023 with compliant status. As I say, with no other changes, that's no additional read and publish agreements, no additional funders creating open access mandates. So that looks pretty positive as a start. And what about this third journal? So this is the one that has never got above 5% open access. Again, I've highlighted what a completely hypothetical, exactly 5% increase in open access would look like year on year. One way of looking at this, it looks quite of a challenge, maybe unrealistic, but another way of looking at it is that it gives us plenty of room for growth. So again, I've showed in orange the number that if all of the current open access authors plus all of the Plan S authors chose to publish open access, this journal could reach around 11% open access with no other changes. And that would take us to the end of 2022 being compliant with the level of growth required without any other changes. So I think it is important to look at the challenges, as Stephen outlined some of them. One of the things I found difficult is that, having made what I consider to be an exciting strategic decision, quite a lot of what we're going to do is quite passive. I think we do need more funders to select paid open access mandates, whether they join Coalition S or do those independently. This will be important to see open access growth, but we can't really do very much about that other than wait. I think it's also important to note that the Plan S funders actually have staggered implementation dates. So roughly my figures were that only 6 of the funders were requiring the implementation for submissions from 2021. And so I guess that even if they're submitted early in the year, they may not be published until later in the year. And other funders have implementation dates that are actually later. So I think that growth of open access in 2021 will be more difficult, but the positive side looking at this is that we're not just going to see a lot of growth in 2021 and then no further growth. I think you can see that there are ways that open access is going to continue to grow in 2022 and 2023. Robert also mentioned the rights retention strategy. We absolutely accept that this was aimed at journals that haven't provided compliant routes, and that Coalition S's preference is for their authors to produce the CC BY version of record. But we do note that if any of the Plan S authors did choose this route and selected CC BY author accepted manuscript deposition, then these articles wouldn't count towards our 5% article growth. So we hope that it won't happen. It's also important to look at the opportunities. We've had to be really clear on the author choices having moved to transformative journal status. So the first choice continues to be non-open access free publication, and this will continue to be important for some of the authors whose funders don't mandate open access, and especially perhaps in the financial climate that we predict is to come. The second option is to pay an APC for gold open access, and now that our hybrid journals have the transformative journal status, they are compliant for this route. And then the third route is that if the author's institution has a read and publish agreement with us, then the author can choose to publish gold open access and not need to pay a fee. We're already seeing that that's very popular with our author base where that applies. This has to be alongside us promoting the benefits of open access, but we do believe that it can help us grow our open access percentage year on year. Absolutely vital are the read and publish agreements. So we do hope that more library consortia will be choosing those for 2021 and future years. As I said, that they have been very popular with the authors in countries that these apply to. And I'm just going to show you what effect this has already had in 2020 year to date. And as I say, only for the 3 consortia for UK, Ireland and Israel. So this is the first journal, which has plateaued at around the 20% open access mark. I think that the figures for the 2020 year to date are quite promising. We can see a good chunk of read and publish agreements leading to open access publishing in that pale green bar at the top. It may not be statistically significant, but I see that as an increase in the level of open access. So I'm very pleased with this. I think it's a pleasing sign. For the second journal, not quite as much. So this has also plateaued in around the 15 to 20% area. You can also see a good chunk of read and publish agreements in light green there for 2020 year to date. But in fact, it's just at the 2017-2018 level. So I'm not seeing that as quite such an optimistic change. But for the third journal, I think this is really interesting. This is the journal that has never got above 5% open access, and this year has managed to break that barrier. You can see a significant percentage of the open access is now from the read and publish deals. And so this community has taken up the opportunity of publishing without having to pay a fee through the read and publish route. So I think that is very promising. There are some challenging questions, and perhaps these will come up in the Q&A later. So what happens if we fail to grow the percentage open access? We need to present this as a transparent experiment, report on our progress or lack of progress. We do note that it requires funder mandates and library consortia helping us with read and publish agreements to support open access for this to succeed. But as Robert pointed out, Coalition S are wanting the journals to succeed on this route, and so we're feeling very positive. Another challenge is what happens if we reach the 75% open access and therefore have to flip to full OA. And I think we would just say that when we're reaching that level, we would actually just say that the majority of our authors are selecting open access. It's a real change in the marketplace, and it would be time to be thinking about that flip, absolutely. What happens at the end of the transition period? So again, a reminder that the transition period is from 2021 to the end of 2024. So we would obviously just have to review our progress or lack of progress and make decisions based on the data. But I will say that the Company of Biologists will be celebrating its 100th birthday in 2025, and we very much hope that we'll have some positive announcements as part of our celebrations. So the key is transparency. That fits with the Plan S goals. We'll be producing an annual public report on our transformational progress alongside our transparent metrics. So in summary, with the first journals to be given transformative journal status by Plan S, it very much works hand in hand with our read and publish agreements to grow our percentage open access. And along with our 2 gold open access journals, this means that we are Plan S compliant for all of our authors, but importantly, it also provides good open access options for all of our authors, whatever their funder. Thank you very much.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you all very much indeed. Can I ask all of our speakers to switch their cameras on, and we have some time for questions and discussion. I wanted to thank you all so very much, not only for the time you've taken to prepare your presentations, but for their clarity and for the tremendous sense now that we're all moving forward to make open access a reality. It's really great to now see practical discussions about how some of these models work and how the Plan S timeline will be hit and what happens after that. So first question for Robert. And this is that both Stephen and Claire have highlighted some challenges. For example, funder policies being different in different parts of the world, regional and subject variation, differences in how APCs are handled. Robert, what can funders do? How far can funders go to help other stakeholders resolve some of these challenges?
Yeah, thanks, Alicia. Yeah, obviously it's a great question and very, very difficult to answer. In terms of the policy alignment, I think that is easy actually, because we do have Plan S, and I think that is very different from the previous position. So we do have a common set of principles. Implementation may vary slightly, but you get a bunch of funders, they're all going to want their own, want some variation. I mean, that's just the reality of the world. But in general, there's a set of overarching principles, which so far I think there's about 23 members. Maybe that's wrong, that number, but 23 funders have signed up to the Coalition S, and I think that does make it easier for publishers, because there is a common set of principles. The funding streams are always going to be more challenging. They are going to be funder specific. So in the UK, we very much favoured, the central APC, central model of giving block grants to universities. Whether that's the right model, time will tell, I suppose. The problem with that is that doesn't really introduce any price competitiveness at the author level, but we think it's benefit for simplicity and so forth. So I think there are clearly challenges, but that's life. I mean, we're all in a very, very challenging time. I think what we're trying to do with Plan S and open access is set a direction of travel. And the analogy I use all the time is the sort of the way the automobile industry is moving from petrol to electric. And that's just going to happen. And if you're Ford or Volkswagen, it must be really challenging if you've got all your factories set up and tools to make petrol cars. But that ain't the future. The future is electric. And I think the same here. The future is not subscription. The future is open access. And we just need to find ways in which we can deliver that.
Thank you very much for that, Robert. And you're here, you're engaged with publishers. It shows that funders are at the table willing. I'm going to ask the same question really of Stephen and Claire now. How can we bring stakeholders together to resolve some of these issues? And in particular, I'm wondering what role for librarians in these discussions? Stephen, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think the I said at the end of my presentation that we've got to listen and understand the different situations everybody's in more than we have done. I think there's a bit of a history of explaining why we have concerns, but not actually listening enough to try and find solutions. That's a bit of a generic answer. Clearly, you know, it could apply to any relationship. But I think there's been a lot of defensive positioning in the past, and we've got to get past that because, you know, we use Robert's analogy. There's no point arguing about why climate change is happening. The reality is it is happening, and you have to deal with it. Equally, I think the move to open is just so required for the research enterprise that our challenge is how to make it happen, not explain the reasons why it's difficult. And I think that attitude needs to be taken by librarians and other funding agencies. Robert and his colleagues at Plan Coalition S have created a more standardized model. It might not be right for everybody, but sitting there and every other funding agency in the world doing their own thing independently doesn't help any of us get there, because it turns the burden to publishers to comply with all these different things. And even some, you know, and close to home, and here I will call out an organisation which I'm really disappointed by, and that's the European Commission. They were part of making Plan S come into being, and they've ended up with different rules, like they will not recognise transformative journals, which is going to be a massive problem for mixed journals, not only to be able to transition to open access, but even for those that are heavily publishing in Europe, to be able to meet the thresholds, the growth thresholds that the transformative journals route requires us to do. And we want to. It's not that we're begrudging it. We want to. At the minute, the funders themselves are not, even when they say that they're supportive of open access, they're then, for their own reasons, deciding that they're not going to be supportive of certain approaches. And that's really unhelpful. So we have to convince them that a common approach helps everybody, and let's understand what the common approach is that meets their goals, rather than try and impose a common approach that doesn't.
Brilliant, Stephen. I love this constructive message, and I like the realism here. There was one clarifying question asked in the chat. You mentioned the European Commission right now, and the question was, did you, I think you did mean the European Commission, but the question is, did you perhaps mean the European Research Council? So let me let you.
No, I meant Horizon Europe. I think ERC has expressed concern that researchers, particularly early career stage researchers, will not have the ability to be able to succeed that their predecessors have, because the choice will be limited, and whether we like it or we don't, some journals just get a greater reach and enable a higher status and success for the articles. Article level metrics is what we believe in, not journal level metrics, but the articles from those mixed journals can be very successful and very important for an early career stage researcher. And the Horizon Europe programme will not, and the European Commission will not, from January, support APCs in those, even those that are trying to transition to open access by embracing formally transformative journals, or those that are just doing it themselves anyway. So it's Horizon Europe I'm really talking about, and that is the European Commission's central approach with the new model grant agreement.
Brilliant, thank you, Stephen. And Claire, do you have any thoughts about how stakeholders can work together to solve some of these policy divergence challenges, but also the very practical challenges that every agreement is slightly different, APCs are handled differently? What do you reckon?
Yeah, I do think that it's harder for a smaller publisher because they just don't have the infrastructure to be doing that. I think I think maybe if I hark back to a positive story, which was I think as I've said, that our read and publish agreements so far have had an enormous impact in the UK, and I think a lot of that is because of the support from the Wellcome Trust, because they did highlight that small publishers in particular were going to find this difficult, and they actually provided funding to help some of the interested parties get together to look for a common approach, but they also just opened that door to have the conversation with JISC for those UK arrangements. And it has made all the difference to the smaller organisations. And a number of publishers got together. So I'm one of the founding members, the Company of Biologists is one of the founding members of the Society Publishers Coalition. And a number of the publishers in that group have also created read and publish agreements through JISC. It's been incredibly helpful. And I think that there could be other ways that other organisations could help open those doors. So finding other consortia and helping to open the doors for smaller publishers to have those conversations. I mean, obviously the ideal would be, a standard template that has been worked on for at least that consortium agreement. But even just opening the door would really help us.
Thank you for that, Claire. And while you've got the speaker, can you tell us, when you took this idea of transformative journal status to your board, did they immediately say, yes, we want this? Or was it difficult for them to weave into your strategy? What was the biggest challenge at that strategy level?
I think they came to it slowly, but fairly surely, actually. I mean, we've been talking about it. It's difficult to say, isn't it? So was it Coalition S was announced in 2018, is that right? So I guess we've been talking about it since then. And we've slowly sort of worked through the options and ruled out lots of other options, but we've always been positive about the transformative journal approach. And I think it was obvious that we were going to select it. It's just that we wanted to wait until we were at we were nearer the time to make the decision. We had all of the information on the table. But I think they've always been very positive about it, and they've always been positive about the message that open access is the direction of travel. It is where we're heading. We have plateaued at the moment, but we could see that it was where we were going in the future. And so I think they saw transformative journals as a positive way of going in that direction.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, quite a detailed question for Robert, I think. So there's apparently a transformative journal approach where you can go for 15% article growth over a 3-year period. So how does that work in year 1 of transformative journal status?
Well, the flippant answer is we expect publishers to get in their TARDIS and time travel.
I'm tweeting this.
That's fine. The more realistic answer, of course, is that's not going to be possible in year 1. But I think it's there to highlight that we want to take this pragmatic approach. So we hope publishers will hit their target in year 1 and year 2 and year 3. But if they don't, then we'll look to see whether we can sort of smooth it over a bigger period. I think it's really difficult to, get into numbers and start. I don't want to commit to anything here. All I would say is that we, as Claire made clear, we Coalition S want to see this model work, and we're delighted that a number of publishers, not all, in fact, not most. At the moment, it's a tiny number of publishers are making use of this model. We'd like to see this model more broadly adopted. I like Stephen's comment on that. It's time to stop finding hurdles and trying to find solutions. This is a solution. And we will work with the publishing community to try and help this. And, we will take a pragmatic approach to these KPIs. We want them to be adhered to, but if there's a way of smoothing it over a longer period of time, we will certainly explore that.
Awesome. And with that, we are at the end of our time. You're all on mute, but just do a little clap in the privacy of your living room or wherever you are. We've had great presentations. So thank you, Robert and Stephen and Claire. And let's do this. Let's make this happen. So back over to you, Max, I think. Thanks, everybody.